Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tat Padam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidyadravinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we are still in the second chapter, and can someone remind us what verse we're on?
We're starting verse 22.
You help us out, Umi?
Sato navayavan shankya tadam shasyani rupanat nama rupena tasyan shau tayoradhyapya nudhrabhavat. One cannot doubt that Brahman, the one and only reality, has no parts, for its parts cannot be conceived of. Names and forms cannot be its parts, for before creation they did not arise.
Yes. So again, striking at this idea, does God have a form? We worship God with a form, with what we call a murti or an idol. But that's an outward representation. Some people need it. One of the great values of or contributions of the three great Semitic religions is God who is without a form. And yet Christians create all sorts of iconography. They put their God into the form of Jesus, etc. We can say in a sense that God has a form, but if we do, we have to say the entire manifest universe. Certainly not Krishna or Shiva or Rama, etc. It is not that which you worship here in the Upanishads. So what about Nama Rupa? Just a virtual reality superimposed upon Vijnana Gana, a homogeneous mass of consciousness. Next verse.
Nama rupo bhavasyaiva srishtitvat srishtita pura na tayorud bhavas tasman niransham sadhya bhaviyat. As creation means the appearance of names and forms, they cannot exist before creation. Therefore, like the Akasha, Brahman is partless and there is no difference within it.
So we talk about, as it were, the phenomenal universe being the body of God. But that's not really it. That's not Brahman. That's not the consciousness in which all of this arises. Again, it all becomes easy to understand if you go to the dream state. You are the God of your dream. In the dream, your one unified mind manifests as a world of name and form. But you are not bound or limited or dependent on it. The morning it goes away and you're still you. So also with the consciousness is birthless. It did not get created. It answers the question, what was there before the Big Bang? It's interesting because in the Hebrew scriptures, in Genesis 1:1, it says, before God created anything, darkness was on the face of the deep or on the face of the waters. And in the Bible, water is frequently a metaphor for consciousness. What was there before creation? Consciousness. Next one.
Sadantaram sajatiyam na vailakshanya varjanat nama rupa dhibhedam vinanaiva satobhida. The difference between objects of the same class can have no reference to Sat, for nothing else exists. One object differs from another on account of its name and form, whereas Brahman is absolutely without name and form.
So last week we had these ways of saying you can have a difference between one leaf of a tree and another leaf of a tree within one object. You can have difference between two similar objects, or you can have a difference from two dissimilar objects. But what Vidyaranya is saying is, in Brahman, there is no otherness. Now, what is the meditation that's implied in this? I see a world of name and form. And in ignorance, I want to think this situation is good. This one is bad. This political situation is what I want. That political situation, oh, terrible. This person I like. That person annoys me. All of that is just dream-like superimposition. Turn the volume level down. Don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. Embrace the world's illogical paradoxes. They're actually quite funny. with this deeply rooted understanding. It's all okay. It's all completely safe. Next verse.
Vijati yamasat tattu na khalvastiti gamyate nasyat prati yogidyatvam vijati yadi bhadakutaha. And about non-existence, we cannot say that it is something that exists. So it cannot serve as a prati yogin. If so, how can there be vijatiya difference?
So I think the point here is we can't say there's a condition before. We can't say that there was non-existence before existence. Is non-existence a thing? Well, it exists as an idea, but that's all. I met a person today who was never born. And I shook hands with him who was an amputee. These are just imaginations. They don't exist. So what again Vidyaranya is striking at is all the various schools of philosophy of the time. We don't have to think of it so much as schools, but of ideas that you and I might think about. Does God change? Do my prayers change God? That's a good one. Does God care about me? Well, wrestle with that. What's going to happen to me when I die? Where did Grandma go now that she's gone? And what he's saying is what's real, which is the conscious, sentient being, which is Kevala, alone, does not go anywhere. It's just the dance of the Namaru, the names and forms. Next verse.
Ekam evaditiyam. Ekam evadvitiyam sat. Siddhamatra tu kechanaha. Vilvala asade vedam. Purasi dityavarnayan. So it is established that Sat is one only without a second. But there are still some who get confused by texts and say that Asat, nothing, existed before creation.
So these are those who are the creationists. Out of nothing came God, came the world. And it also may reference the Shunyavadins, who say that ultimate reality is nothing. Out of nothing, everything came. And Vedanta says that our essential nature is no thing, but it is not nothing. It is both shunya empty like the sky, but Purna, full of Sat, full of is, full of being, full of existence. Next one.
Agyasyabdhau yata shani vihvalani tathasyadhi akhandai karasam shrutva nishprachara vibhedyatah. As a man who has fallen into the sea, as a man who has fallen into the sea is bewildered and loses the power of exercising his senses, so they too become afraid and nervous when they hear of the reality as one only without parts.
Yes. So when a person falls into the ocean, they fall below the water, especially if it's surf and stuff like that, you don't know which way is up. You lose your sense of direction and you get frightened. Or you struggle, the more difficult it gets. So too, yogis on the path can become fearful for two reasons. First, the idea that I, as an individual, don't exist, that it's just a mental construct. But also, everything that I have held dear, by which I define myself and my values, his imagination is not real. Everything in the world that I thought was important is not. And for people who are identified with the ego and who take the phenomenal world as real, that's frightening. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
Gaudacharya nirvikalpe samadha vanyayaginam sakara brahmanishtanam atyantam bhayamuchira. The teacher Gaudapada speaks of the great fear of some yogins who are devoted to Brahman with form regarding the objectless superconsciousness state.
Yes, so here he makes reference to Gaudapada. Gaudapada was the teacher of Govindapada. Govindapada was the teacher of Shankara. Gaudapada is also the great glosser on the Mandukya Upanishad. He writes the Mandukya Karika. He's also, I think, isn't he the compiler of the Brahma Sutras? I may be wrong on that. I have to look it up. Anyway, he's an important Bhaktivan. And what he's saying again, people who hang on to God with a form become frightened when you tell them that the form they worship is void. Now, people kill one another over their attachment to a God with a form. What else is the source of the conflict between Hindu and Muslim in India. Well, power probably more than anything else, but it has its origin. My gods are different than your God. What else was the issue between Christian and Jew? Between Catholic and Protestant? Love God or I'll kill you. Very weird. So not only do we get fearful when we are told it's not that which you worship here, your idea of divinity is not it. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
Sparsha yogo namaisha durdarsha sarva yogivihi yogino bibhyati hamsat bhaye bhaya darshinaha. This identification with the ungrasped and the ungraspable reality is difficult to achieve. They are indeed seeing fear in the fearless.
Yes. And the truth is, there's nothing to fear. In fact, the loss of a personal sense of self is total security. It's completely safe. Everything is completely safe. But such is the mind, I can come to a place where I truly have the conviction I'm no longer frightened of death. But that idiot in traffic sure upsets me. Isn't that crazy? Great cosmic things I think I've resolved, but these little things, I let it rob me of my serenity. It's funny. It's contradictions in the mind, the inconsistencies. All right, next one.
Bhagavat Pujyapadascha Shushkatarka Patunamun Ahur Madhyadhikan Bhranta Chintyesmin Sadatmane. The highly respected Bhagavat Pada Shankara also refers to the Madhyatmikas, experts in dry ratiocination.
Rationalization.
Rationalization. Okay.
Is that right?
No, it's a word I haven't come across. Ratiocination. Contradicting the Vedic view is what it says in parentheses.
Oh, I don't know anything about this. Anyway, what's it say about it?
As confused regarding the self-existent Brahman who is without thought or who is beyond thought.
So you can come up with virtually any kind of conclusion through doing theology. What is theology? We start with absolute articles of faith and then proceed with rational logic. And you can get practically anywhere that way, depending on what you start with. So there have been many, many dry logicians who can talk themselves in and out of anything. What pops to my mind, a true story. I had a very, very dear friend who was an Episcopal priest. His name was Raleigh Jones, rest his soul. And he was quite close to the Episcopal Bishop of California at that time, whose name was Kilmer Myers. Kilmer Myers, bless him, was an active alcoholic. And Bishop Myers would be drunk on his butt and say, Alcoholics Anonymous was theologically naive. He was able to rationalize why it wouldn't work. Because he had a PhD and he was a bishop. And died a drunk. So with false logic, we can talk ourselves into all sorts of nonsense. Now, there is a place for reason in the tradition. Remember, our first authority is Ch.2, the Upanishads. Second authority, what the recorded evidence of the great sages say through time. It's true, it's true, it's true. The third is your own logical reasoning. Real spirituality is profound common sense. You don't need to have twisted logic. It's simple. The fourth authority is your own direct experience. It's real simple. Do you see the water glass? Yeah. You're not a water glass. Well, maybe if I take LSD and merge into the water glass, I'll be a water glass. That's nonsense. You're not a water glass. You're the one who sees it. If you can understand that, you can understand all of Viveka. Very simple. If you can be aware of it, it's not you. Then buy it up. Drop your fascination. Next verse.
Anadhyatya Shrutim Maukhya Adime Baudhyasta Masvinaha Ape Dire Niratmatva Anu Manaika Chakshupaha. These Buddhists, merged in darkness and seeing through one eye of inference and neglecting the authority of the Veda, reached only the quote nothingness.
Oh, so he's doing what so many of the ancient teachers do, which is they assert the value of their own teaching and diss everybody else's. So again, what he's striking at is the school of the Shunyavadins, the scholiasts of the void, who say that ultimate reality is nothing. Now listen carefully. Maybe they're right. Why don't you meditate? Thin the mind as much as possible. Do what the Buddha did. Sit there until you, and you will see what disappears. That's it. Blind faith is stupid faith and will fail us in a crisis. You want to be a spiritual scientist. If a scientist goes in to perform an experiment with a prejudice as to the outcome, it will distort her findings. You have to have an open mind. So my suggestion, throw out everything that is not absolutely verifiable by direct experience. Consider it, but don't believe it on an external authority. You mean throw the Vedanta out? Try it. Maybe the Buddhists are right. Go there and see. Now, true story. Swamiji was very good friends with the Dalai Lama. And when at the end of the brahmachari training course, all the brahmacharis and delegates from all over the world would converge on Siddhabari, Swamiji would teach Vivekachudamani. And I had the great privilege of being there in 1988. It was one time when His Holiness did not come and visit us. He was out of the country at the time. We only got the Tibetan Secretary of State. But he used to laugh and say, "Oh, oh, oh, His Holiness thinks he's a zero." They both go, "Oh, oh, oh, oh." No attachment to anything. Any thoughts on this? Especially those of us who spend a lot of time in Scripture. It is a useful practice to just sit down and renounce it all. Any thoughts on this? By the way, I still come up with the truth that Vedanta teaches whenever I do that. I'm still here doing this. Next verse.
Shunyamasi diti bhrushe sadhyo gam vasadatmanam shunyasya tanutat yuktam ubhayam vyahatat vatah. We asked the Buddhists, when you said, quote, nothing existed, end quote, in Shloka 26, did you mean it nothing was connected with existence, Sat, or it nothing was the nature of existence? In either case, its nothingness is contradicted.
So here, Vidyaranya is going to get caught up in Tarka, in logic, to try to illuminate a fallacy. Let me tell you some direct experience. So those Buddhists who perhaps have not had Satori can be attached to a teaching that ultimate reality is nothing. However, the Buddhists I have met, I've met a couple of them who are Thai forest tradition. This one young man, he was trained by a Vietnamese nun from San Diego. And the idea is when the Buddha taught the doctrine of anatma, no self, he meant what we would say, there's no jiva, there's no individuality. That ahankara is an illusion. That this jiva bhavana, this attitude or feeling that a person isn't real. It is the same teaching as Vedanta. But this nun with thunder, it's the consciousness, it's the consciousness. This young man told me. Very, very deep Buddhist master. What she taught was identical to the Vedanta. Now, many people have said Shankara is a veiled Buddhist because he sees personal gods as fundamentally unreal. Don't worry about all these various philosophies. It's not important. Prove or disprove your essential nature by your own direct experience. That's the point I say. Something does disappear, no doubt. But something there is that witnesses its disappearance. Any thoughts on this? Going on.
न युक्तस्तमा सा सूर्यो नापि चासौ तमोमयः सच्छून्य योर्विरोधित्वात् शून्यमासीत् कथं वद. The sun does not have the attributes of darkness, nor is it itself of the nature of darkness. As existence and non-existence are similarly contradicted, you cannot predicate something about nothing. So how do you say, quote, nothing existed?
Yes, the phrase nothing existed is a contradiction in terms, is what he's saying. If nothing existed, then nothing isn't nothing. It's something if it has existence. This is just playing with words. I don't particularly feel what he's saying is fruitful. He's just playing with words and logic. But the point is, at the peak of meditation in samadhi, is the ultimate experience nothing? It's a contradiction in terms. Whatever goes or comes, something is there to illuminate. Always. Going on.
Vyardade nama vyardade namarupe mayaya suvikalpite shunyasya namarupe cha tatha che jivya tam chiram. The Buddhists retort, according to you Vedantins, the names and forms of Akasha and other elements are conjured up by Maya in or on Sat, the existence or reality. Similarly, according to us, they, names and forms, are illusively produced by Maya in or on non-existence, Asat. Reply. Our answer is, quote, may you live long, end quote.
Sorry, say it again.
Our answer is, quote, may you live long, end quote. That is, you have fallen into a logical trap.
Yes. So how can something be superimposed on nothing? What's the cause of all that? It's like falling into a black hole. And he's very polite. He says, may you live. And this is why, by and large, this is just me. I see very little point in arguing spiritual philosophy with people. And I am one who believes that who we are speaks much louder than anything we can say. When I'm in the presence of a woman or a man of wisdom, they don't have to say a word. You know, oh, this is an old. Someone else may go, even if it's correct Vedanta. Paroksha jnana, indirect knowledge. There's a story in Yoga Vasishta about King Janaka has an assembly of Brahmins, and then the son of Varuna comes and wants to have all these esteemed Brahmins at his father's ritual, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on. But there's a woman ascetic with matted locks who's silent in the back. She says nothing. Till Janaka says, listen to her. And all the tarka, all the argument becomes meaningless. She is able to unfold the truth from her direct experience, which is simple. Next verse.
Satopi nama rupe dve kalpite chettada vada kutraiti niradhisthano na brahma kachid dikshate. If you affirm that name and form attributed to an existing thing are both creations of Maya, an illusory principle, then tell us what is the substratum upon which Maya creates names and forms, for illusion without a substratum is never seen.
Yes. So, superimposition. I illusorily see the snake, but the substratum's the rope. I illusorily see the mirage, but the substratum is desert. So with Maya is the power of illusion that superimposes or produces name and form. What's it superimposed on? What's the substratum? Again, he's relying on the laws of argument. If it becomes too heady, my suggestion is don't worry about it. Let's go on.
सदा सीदिति शब्दार्थ भेदे वैगुण्यमापतेत् अभेदे पुनरुक्तिस्य अन्येवं लोके तथैक्षणात्. The opponent says, in the Vedic text, quote, existence was Sat Asit, end quote. If the two words mean differently, then two separate things come in. If the words refer to the same thing, then there is tautology. The Vedantin replies, not.
Wait a minute, for me, I know what sat is. What is asit? A-S-I-T?
Yeah. So it says Sat and Asit are both derived from the root as, which signifies existence.
So asit would be non-existence. Is that what he's implying?
It says if the two are accepted as referring to two things, the idea of secondless Brahman is affected. Both refer to the same thing, but the use of two words cannot be a fault because it is common in usage.
Okay. So what I can say is there is Puneet over there. He has dark hair. There is Puneet over there. He has two legs. Well, make up your mind. Does he have dark hair or does he have two legs? We don't worry about that. Two different descriptions can refer to the same thing. I don't know what asit means. We'll have to look it up. Ganesh, are you out there? Do you know what asit means?
I don't know, Jim.
Okay. But the idea is this. The same object can be implied with different words. We can say, oh, Puneet is the fellow over there with the black hair. Or I can say, oh, Puneet is the fellow over there with the two legs.
Asit is actually is. So you know how something is.
Oh, okay.
So I think the translation is existence was, which is, and existence is Sat and was is Asit.
Okay.
So that's the translation. So isness is Asit.
Like asti.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
It's the past tense of Asti.
Okay. All right. So again, the idea here is the scriptures will use many words to indicate the infant. It does not imply two things. The self is both nityam, eternally now, and purana, ancient. Well, how can it be both? Meaning it pervades the past, present, and future, but is now. Not contradictory. Going on.
Kartavyam kurute vakyam dhrute dharyasya dharanam ityadi vasana vishtam pratyasit sadatiranam. We all use the expressions, quote, what has to be done has been done, end quote. Quote, speech is spoken, end quote, and a burden is borne. The Vedic text, existence was, end quote, is meant for those whose minds are accustomed to such expressions.
Oh, it's a figure of speech that he's talking about. Existence was is what I see what it means now. Yes. So if the scripture says existence was, it implies that a long time ago existence was, it came from something. It's just a figure of speech. It does not imply that existence came into being. That's all he's driving at. All right, my bad. Going on.
Kala bhave puretyukti kalavasana yutam shishyam pratyevate natra Dvitiyam na hi shankyate. Such texts as, quote, before creation, end quote, spoken in reference to Brahman, who is timeless, are meant for beginners who are used to the idea of time. They do not imply the existence of duality.
And what they ultimately do, I like to use the example of Newtonian physics. All of the myths about creation are a partial understanding. If we go to the very small quantum physics or the very big relativity, Newtonian physics falls apart. Another metaphor you can use, the 4-year-old says, "Mommy, where do babies come from?" And Mommy says, "The stork brings them, dear, eat your dinner." It is a phrase that's given to the child to resolve a doubt that cannot be resolved by the actual truth. So we have to be able to hold what appears to be contradiction in scriptures in that way. No scripture is meant to be read literalistically, because all scripture is contradictory. And it all has a cultural and a temporal context. There's no scripture that's immune from it. The truth is of your Upadesha, unteachable, untalkaboutable. Next one.
Yodhyam va pariharo va kriyatam dvaita bhashaya advaita bhashaya jyodhyam nasti napi taduttaram. Objections are raised and answered from the point of view of duality. From the standpoint of pure non-duality, neither questions nor answers are possible.
Yes. Meaning, once the yogi understands that you can't think a real thought, logic isn't real. The questions and answers are unreal. I had the weirdest dream this morning. I was in kind of like this classroom, and there was a bunch of people, and they were singing this motet, and I happened to know it, and I was singing along with it. And then I was supposed to go get my car, which was at the other end of it was a campus, it was a school, and I stayed late, and I had all this music packed up in a briefcase, and I walked outside, and there was this like arroyo. All of a sudden, these gullies, and they kept shifting, and no matter which way I went, I couldn't get back to my car, and I got lost, and I kept asking people, how do you get to the main campus? Now, in the dream, the shifting landscape and the distances shifting and changing seemed logical and real. I was going to sing along with a motet, and they had different words to the motet. I said, those aren't the right words, you know. All seemed logical. So a dream has its own internal logic, not real. If any of you have flying dreams, flying seems logical. The laws of the dream allow for flying. Not real. So what Vidyaranya is saying is not. Now, there's a deeper purpose to these discussions. You have to imagine the audience that Vidyaranya is dealing with. Probably young Brahmin boys. You know, when I sent out that thing about people taking the brahmachari training class, and it would be people from 20 to 39, you had to be single. Of things, no student loan, by the way, you have to have it all paid off. And your parents have to be able to be taken care of, if you're Indian especially. But back in Vidyaranyan's day, young men, probably in their teens, maybe early 20s, Brahmins. And they had their cultural attachments. Probably raised in a family where they did puja and yajna all the time. They've been trained in Vedic chanting and stuff like that with this enormous reverence for the Vedas. And then when the teacher says, unreal, the God you worship, that's not it. The scripture you depend on and revere, that's not it. These young people are going, wait a minute. Fear arises. Everything we've held on to has to go. Even the scriptures. Any thoughts on this? All right, next verse.
Tada sthita gambhir na tejo na tamastatam anakhya manabhivyaktam satkichin satkinchit dava shishyate. What remains after dissolution is an unmoving and ungraspable, unnamed and unnameable, unmanifest, indefinite something, beyond light and darkness and all-pervading.
Yes. Again, he's using words to try to describe what cannot be described. Go there. In an auspicious moment of meditation, in the space between your thoughts, with your attentive faculty turned within. Who is it? What is it that sees the thoughts and the space between them? And you cannot see it as an object. It has no form. Yet it is not unknown. It knows itself. That way it is both knowable and unknowable. Not knowable as an object, as an experience, as a concept. But always know as aham. Next one.
Nanu bhumyadikam ma bhut paraman vantanashatah katham te viyato sattvam buddhimaro hatiti chet. Objection.
Going on, I'm sorry, I think it's funny.
When the molecules of the four elements, earth, water, fire, and air, are dissolved, we may have an idea of the dissolution of those elements. But how can our intellect grasp the dissolution of Akasha, which is not composed of molecules? Hence, Akasha is eternal.
So stuff can be dissolved or destroyed, but the space in which the stuff occurs, can that be dissolved or destroyed? Now, our modern day physicists have this notion of which they call inflation theory. So in the nanoseconds after the Big Bang, the universe inflated faster than the speed of light to 3/4 of the size that it is now. Inflation. And space and time were created. When there was no universe, there was no space. But in Vidyaranya's time, the idea was that space is a constant. Now we know large masses distort space-time. They thought it was sthita, still. So we can dissolve earth, air, fire, water, not space. And actually physics says, yes, we can. We can now see it when we study supermassive black holes. Matter, energy, space, and time. Let's see what Vidyaranya says about
Atyantam nirjagat vyoyama yathate buddhimashritam tathaiva sannirakasham kuto nashjayate matam. Reply. If your mind can conceive of the existence of Akasha in the total absence of the atomic world of names, forms, and motions, why could we not conceive of Sat without Akasha?
So, actually, can we conceive of space without the objects in it? Now we can, pretty much. Space in the glass, space in the room, etc. But I think I'm going to push back again a little bit on Vidyaranya. I think an easier way to understand this, let's go back to the dream I had this morning. In my dream, I not only created a classroom, but the classroom existed in space. And there was space inside the classroom. And I went outside, and when I was trying to find my way through these canyons in the arroyo, my mind created even bigger space. And when I woke up, where did the space in my dream go? So space itself is created by mind. And physics comes very close to that. Next verse.
Nirjagat tavyomam drishtam chet prakashatmasi vina kva drishtam kinchate pakshe na pratyaksham virat khalu. If the opponent holds that Akasha can be perceived in the absence of the rest of the world, we may ask, where can it be seen except as light and darkness? That is, what you seem to perceive is not Akasha but light and darkness. Besides, according to the opponent's view, Akasha cannot be perceived by the senses.
Yes. So what instrument perceives Akasha, perceives space? Actually, what we are perceiving is light and darkness. I see that the room is vast. I see the outside, the sky above. I'm seeing space. At night, I see the vastness of the night sky. Do I really perceive space, or do I really just perceive stuff in it with spatial relationships? Again, I make it simpler. You have the experience of the mind creating space in the dream. This is no different. The only difference is who's doing the dreaming. Any thoughts? Okay, we'll end here. What verse are we on for next week?
44.
44. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Bit gnarly stuff tonight. My suggestion is don't get too caught up in it. Actually, the truth is simple. Very, very simple. Who are you? What is this world? How has it come about? 3 profound questions with simple answers. Thank you all.